Great to have you all with us. Please keep the chat open as well. We'll be using that as we always do throughout the call. That's your opportunity to interact with our guests once we introduce them and bring them on board for the main conversation. But for those of you that are new to Next Practices Weekly, we are I4CP, the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're your human capital research firm. We focus on discovering the people practices that drive high performance in organizations just like yours. We define high performance as revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. So when we do our major research studies across all areas of HR, we're trying to find out and tease out what practices are the high performance companies, as defined by those criteria, are doing far more often than low performing organizations. And we make that clear in our research studies, infographics, data sets, case studies, and lots more. We are a member-based organization. You see here just a small sample of some of the member logos of organizations in our community. If you're with a member company and with us on the call today, special welcome to you. If you're not with a member organization but would like to learn more about what that entails, just reach out to anyone at I4CP or go to i4cp.com and you can get more information and reach out that way. You see that our member community is quite broad. We've got very large organizations, from Citi, 3M, Microsoft, Visa, Amazon, and many others across all really market verticals, from finance to high tech, healthcare, retail, you name it. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP. I have the pleasure most weeks of co-hosting Next Practices Weekly. And this week, my co-host is my fellow senior research analyst on our team, Amber Burton. Good morning, Amber.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you with us today, Amber. You'll be leading the conversation in just a couple of minutes with our special guests. But a couple of other quick announcements and reminders. This is Next Practices Weekly, so we have sessions most Thursdays, barring holidays and the like. You see we've got some outstanding guests coming up from organizations like Oshkosh, Magna International, and UPS on November 7th, 14th, and 21st. So things keep plugging along here at Next Practices Weekly. We also hold at I4CP a major conference once a year in March. This year it'll be early in March 3rd through 6th, so hopefully that won't interfere with anyone's spring break plans or the like. A lot of people are already registering for the event because we've announced the majority of our speaker lineup. You see here just some of those speakers. They range from CHROs at major organizations. We have some CEOs, thought leaders from academia, and many others that you'll want to hear from. Our conference is different in a couple of ways. One, they're all sort of keynote, broad audience sessions. There's no thick program to have to make difficult choices on. And we also don't allow any vendors at our conference. There's no expo hall or trade show, no sales talk going on. It's just a conference for over 500 HR leaders and professionals to get together, network, and learn from each other. You see there in the bottom left, there's a QR code. A lot of people are registering already. If you registered before November 15th, you can save $300. So just go to i4cp.com/conference or use that QR code to learn more. Also want to note our most recent study. We've done a lot of work over the years on organizational culture, starting with our major study several years back on culture renovation. Many of you are familiar with that. Of course, that led to the book written by our CEO, Kevin Oakes. We've done multiple studies since then, drilling down on what makes for healthy versus toxic cultures. And then our most recent, what we're dubbing the future-ready culture. A lot of very interesting findings in this new report. You can download the brief at the link that Zeta will put in the chat, or again, use the QR code. And you can also get a synopsis of some of the key findings at an upcoming webinar that we'll host on November 19th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern U.S. time. You see our CEO, Kevin Oakes, and our VP of Advisory Services, Marshall Bergman, will be hosting that event. Again, QR code on the screen and link provided over in the chat. With that, I'm going to turn things over to you, Amber, to facilitate the conversation with our two special guests today.
Absolutely. Well, we are excited to jump into this conversation. We have a lot to cover, but of course, we want to start with the introduction. So today we have Raymone Jackson, who's the Vice President and Global Head of DEI, Community Investment and Corporate Responsibility at Rowe Price. And we also have Pam Lipp-Hendricks, Head of Talent at Rowe Price as well. So they wear a lot of hats. We're going to dive deep into the work they do, but I always like to start by letting our speakers introduce themselves. So why don't you both briefly introduce yourselves, including your roles, but also let's go a little bit into your career journeys as well. So Raymone, we'll start with you.
Yes, happy to start first. And hello, everyone. Thanks for being here and thanks for certainly joining our session today. Raymone Jackson, pronouns are he, him, and his. And certainly, as Amber shared, I get the great pleasure of leading diversity, equity, and inclusion, community investment, and corporate responsibility at Rowe Price, which ultimately means that I really drive kind of our diverse and inclusive outcomes from a workforce, workplace, marketplace perspective. And community investment have accountability for how does Rowe Price show up outside of our four walls. Philanthropically and from a community service perspective. From a career perspective, I landed in HR, certainly about 10 years ago now. I started my career certainly in the same industry of financial services, but initially in technology, and had a transition early in my career from technology to corporate strategy, doing all things big data, mergers and acquisition, and market sizing, and then moved to distribution, really helping our financial advisors better understand how to help their clients create financial plans and certainly achieve, hopefully, their most amazing future. And after doing that for a couple of years, was asked to step into a diversity, equity, and inclusion role. And I was frightened at the thought, but certainly have fallen in love with the body of work and have been doing this work for 10 years and joined Rowe Price 4 years ago. So I've been really excited for that. I'm based here in Baltimore, but have had careers in New York City, and I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin originally. So it's great to be here.
Thank you. And what an awesome path. You can never predict where you're going to end up, but I think that speaks to the practice for sure. Pam, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Thank you. Hi, everybody. And no one is happier than I am that Ramone's path brought him this way so that we get to work together. So we have a really good time and we hope we're making a difference. So hi, everybody. Pam Lipp-Hendricks. I am the head of talent here at Rowe Price. I have been here. I just celebrated my 3rd anniversary. So I grew up in New York as well. So I was at JP Chase for just about 22 years, where I think I did most of my growth. Unlike Raymone, I have always been in HR. So in my 20s, I got my PhD, and yes, that was all of my 20s. So I took the long route, like a 10-year route, because I really, really loved school and didn't think that I wanted to actually ever come to work in corporate America, but here I am. And so after getting my degree, I worked at Chase, which went through multiple mergers. So I got really good at how to do mergers. And I really spent a lot of time in the development space. So covering really all aspects: diversity, talent, learning, whether that's technical learning or the professional skills, and even had a brief stint as an HR business partner for HR. So that was my one and only client as an HR business partner. And once you cover HR, either you love the HR business partner role or you decide it's probably not for you and you head back into the talent space, which is what I did. And spent some time in leadership, executive talent management, and was also the chief diversity officer at JP Morgan for a couple of years. And then came on to Rowe, where I had talent. And I also live in Baltimore. I have 2 children, a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, both of whom are dressing up for Halloween today. So I'm excited that they're still kids at heart, even though they are very, very, very much teens.
That is awesome. Awesome. Well, let's jump right into just telling everyone a little bit more about Rowe Price for those who are not familiar with the organization. So can you just tell us a little bit more, and then we'll talk a little bit about how HR is structured there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share some insight on Rowe Price. And certainly I will not exhaust the slide, but we celebrated our 87th year here in 2024. We are an asset management organization, really helping both institutional clients and individual clients bridge that gap, as I said earlier, between where they are today and that certainly their financial success and outcomes, with a very deep focus certainly on retirement planning and retirement outcomes. From a size and scale perspective, just over 7,200 associates globally around the world. About 58% are diverse, so women and or ethnically diverse. 44% female. As I said earlier, we are headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland, and we operate and have clients in about 52 countries and spaces. So lots of HR and talent things for us to dig into, and it keeps both Pam and I and our teams very busy almost all the time. And from an HR perspective, I'll let Pam talk about our HR structure and kind of how our function looks.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to. And I just want you to know that picture that's there is the view kind of right outside our building. So for those of you who have ever not thought that Baltimore was a beautiful place to be, or that you didn't want to come visit us, come work here, we're always looking for great talent. So our HR structure is one of, it's probably pretty typical with centers of excellence and the HR business partner roles. So we have Raymone Center of Excellence, which he's talked to you about already, which is DE&I and community investment. You've got mine, which is talent, and then we have a total rewards group. Underneath all of that, we also have a talent an HR enablement organization, which covers our shared services, which also includes payroll. And then it's our technology and operations as well as our data. So that all sits in one center. We have the HR business partners. And I think what makes us a little bit different is we actually have corporate communications as well. And so corporate communications is all of the internal communications as well as a PR role for external communications, not as it relates directly to the business because they have their own external communications partners, but as it relates to issues across the corporation. And so they partner really closely with the CEO and our management committee to make sure that those messages are the ones that we want to have externally. So I think that's probably the big difference. Did I forget anybody, Raymone? I think I got everybody.
You got everyone. The only piece I'd add is that we also have an head of HR based for our EMEA region, based in London, and also someone that looks after APAC that's based in Sydney right now. So really making sure that we're thinking about this work globally.
Absolutely. And we know structure also speaks to culture, and I wouldn't be at I4CP if I didn't speak about culture. Tell us a little bit about what the culture is like at Rowe Price.
Yeah, I've enjoyed getting to kind of learn the culture. I joined during the pandemic, so I didn't get to experience it all fully because it was all remote when I joined the firm. So I've gotten to certainly learn it more so in person for the last couple of years. But the words that I would certainly use to describe the Rowe Price culture, one, data-driven, given the work that we do. We are certainly investment managers and portfolio managers at the core. So data-driven, collaborative, client-centered, and nice. I think nice is that we have this. I think every firm probably has their own kind of verbiage around it, but we talk about T-Row nice as a way to think about how we work together, and also accessible. You know, when I joined Rowe Price, and I joined from Morgan Stanley in New York before, I was surprised at how accessible our leaders are. It was not uncommon for an associate to email the CEO, whether it was a nice note or a congratulatory note, and ask for coffee or tea. Or to catch up. And that was surprising to me coming from a larger organization with a lot more governance around it. So it really has been a nice part of how we think about our culture, but certainly would offer Pam the space to add some additional components of the culture.
Yeah, I think you hit it right. If you think about, for me, coming from a great big organization, JP Morgan's around 260,000, I think when I left. I think it's much bigger than that now. And coming to an organization that's just under 8,000 people. There's definitely a familial feel here where people really do, there's deep care for the people that we work with in just, and I think because of how the organization has grown up, you know, with the majority of our employees in Baltimore, and people really knew each other well. And so I think as we've continued to scale, that feeling of deep care is really underneath it. And it comes through, I think, in a lot of our policies and processes, which, you know, there's pros and cons to that, right? Like families can be, sometimes families are hard and sometimes families are amazing, but the culture is one where I think that data-driven, I think that as we're stepping into thinking about the just really seismic changes in our industry, how do we step forward into innovation together and collaborating and moving forward? There's a strength underneath as well, and a resilience in this culture, I think, that we're continuing to build.
Absolutely. Well, we are talking today just on how DEI and talent partner together effectively at the organization. And so I'd love to just kind of start by having you describe the mission, purpose, and vision for each of you at the organization.
Yeah, I think we'll start with the talent piece, but I love this visual because it really does speak to kind of how Pam and our teams work together. And as she said earlier, I think I hit the jackpot as well, having someone join that leads talent, but also had a diversity and inclusion hat on before as well. So we really do get to partner in really designing some really great solutions together. So this just gives you a visual of how our intersections work, but we'll talk now about some of our mission and purpose areas.
Yeah, before we move on, I do think like this visual is one that I've actually thought about for years, because at one point when I was a chief diversity officer, I was also running talent, and people struggled to understand why we would put those two together. And the thing that finally got it was when I said to people, you know, there's overlap, but there's definitely some things that you're going to focus on in DE&I, and there's definitely going to be some things you'll focus on in talent. But if you think about that intersection in the Venn diagram, there really is a lot of overlap, and I think where you are in your journey as an organization is how big that overlap would be and how much focus that it gets. So it really does give you some opportunity, but I think it's just a really cool way for people to go, oh, it's not 100% that everything is the same, but there are so many things that cut across.
Absolutely. I mean, we're already hearing in the chat, we love this diagram, and it actually speaks to some priorities that we're seeing emerge moving into the coming year. I mean, we do our big priorities and predictions report every year, and we're seeing a trend among chief diversity officers, but HR leaders in general, saying alignment is key to everything. And so maybe you can kind of give us a sneak peek. I was going to hit on this later, but how do you two work together on a day-to-day basis? I think that's a relationship that a lot of leaders are trying to figure out in your roles.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about our relationship, and then I also have another comment. So I think because I used to have DE&I, I have a special place in my heart, because when you work in that space, it just becomes a labor of love, and it becomes a passion and a commitment. I think that becomes part of who you are. What I love about the fact that I have a partner is that my biggest aha when I was running both talent and diversity was that I had always thought of myself, when I was kind of in the talent space before, I was connected to the chief diversity officer, and I partnered with her all the time. And I would have said, I really thought about things thoroughly from a DE&I lens. And one day I was looking at something we were doing, and I realized I had only thought about half of it. And I had a big aha that until I actually, as a leader, owned something, it changed my perspective in terms of how hard I wanted to push in integrating and incorporating DE&I into some of our talent processes at the time. So what I love about having a partner is that Raymone and his team provide an objective lens to what I'm doing, and I am accountable to Raymone to make sure that I incorporate and try to help execute what his vision is. But he's got a different viewpoint of me because he's not kind of deep in the talent processes. So how we work together is pretty much constantly. So when we're rolling out something new, when we're building something, when we have run things for years, Raymone may suggest, like, let's do an audit, or have we thought about this? He asks, and his team ask really good questions for us to think about and make sure we're incorporating and trying to knock bias out of processes, right? But at the end of the day, I have to take his feedback. We have to drive it through our team. And then there's the loop where we have to go back and say, kind of, this is what we found, or this is what we want to do. And what would you say? What are you hearing out there from your circle? And what are some things that maybe we're not thinking about? So I think it's a really good back and forth. We sit not too far from each other. We're in different buildings. We have multiple campuses. But in the campus we're in today, we sit really close to each other. So we are wandering to desks, we are texting, we are teaming, we are whatever it is to kind of make sure that we are connected. So Raymone, what else would you add?
I think the only piece that I would add on is that it's not just certainly Pam and I, it's our teams. I think we built the culture around the expectation that our teams are partnering. And as an example, we're looking at, on the DE&I side, what is the next evolution of our leadership training around kind of inclusive leadership? And one of my direct reports met with certainly Pam's direct report that leads leadership development around what are the vendors, what are the topics, how do we make sure that our content that we think is important aligns with the leadership framework that you'll hear about shortly. So it really is more so the culture that we've created, so that for the bulk of our working teams and projects and bodies of work, our teams are on those together, really designing things from the beginning, and then certainly giving feedback on the back end as well. we missed some things along the way because we certainly are moving quickly, but because
Yeah.
of our relationship and our consistent partnership, we're catching things early, and when we do miss something, it's not personal. We know it's just that we're moving really quickly.
Yeah. I see in the chat that someone's asking, is this a mature, does this Venn diagram represent a mature talent and DEI teams? I'd say we're maturing. I wouldn't say we're mature. I mean, Raymone really, he joined 4 years ago, and really put into place some practices around goals and how to think about diversity and how to incorporate it into processes. So I'd say because of his expertise and his leadership and the engagement and him being able to engage our leaders, I think we've accelerated, but I'm not sure I'd say we're we're probably early maturity is how I would categorize it. I don't know, Raymone, if you'd say that differently.
No, I agree. And I would say for those that are certainly that asked the question and beyond, is that it may look different for every organization. I mean, you may have talent and D&I together, so you may not have a Venn diagram. You may talk about the work differently. So I think it really depends on how you're structured and how you think about DE&I and talent as centers of excellence. But I think, as Pam indicated, for us, like, we are maturing and we're building a lot of really great things, and we're learning along the way.
Yep.
Yeah, let's get into that mission, purpose, and vision, and kind of how that
Sure.
likely serves as the foundation for all of it. You can't have a mature, organization without that being at the root of everything. So let's unpack that a bit.
Sure. So from a talent perspective, first, I want to let everybody know we call our employees associates. So when you hear us say associate, that refers to our employee population. And one of the things I would say that Raymone noticed and I noticed when I got here is that we are because we are a fiduciary, we are clients first. We have to be, right? We are committed to that because we are a fiduciary. But we did not also then focus on associates. I think we focused on having really good, strong processes from the point of view of experts, but not necessarily from the point of view of the user. And we are shifting that now. So when my team came together and we started thinking about what are we trying to do, if you think about all the levers that I have, it starts with acquisition. I've got leadership development, career development, organizational development, and something else that I'm forgetting right now that I have, but that's enough. And so we started to say, if we start to think about the associate experience, it's our job to create compelling experiences for our associates through all of our opportunities, through building themselves, through learning, through learning skills and building their careers. And so I'm not going to read our purpose statement. You can read it, but it is really, if you think about attracting, retaining, and advancing, so that kind of development aspect, while I'm really into systemic team development. And so I think that that's how you really scale an organization. It's not a compelling sell to people. I'm trying to figure out how to sell that, but kind of creating effective teams that can really then scale across an organization, I think, is how you are going to drive change. And we will do this because it is very important for us. We are because we are a relatively small company, again, heavily Baltimore based. Those connections are so important to who we are, having those personal relationships. And we also are trying to shift into a growth-minded organization. So that is one of our imperatives. And so we are trying to cultivate leaders. We are cultivating leadership and growth mindsets. We're creating those connections. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to impact is both the success and development of individuals as well as the company.
Absolutely.
And so I'd say, as I turn it over to Raymone, it is important that we, those connections, that we're building them in truth and candor, in real relationships, are what is going to propel the company forward. And I think that's where our DE&I and our culture come into play. So Raymone?
Yep. So as we kind of look at DE&I, and for me, we tend to talk about DE&I as really our performance multiplier. It really is, as you think about the talent mission that Pam shared, when you add DE&I in an integrated manner, it allows each of our associates to hopefully show up, more fully, able to innovate, to ideate, and deliver on our firm mission. So at the core for me, I look at DE&I as really a change management agenda, for the organization. So when I joined, I really wanted to take the firm globally on this journey towards full inclusion, diversity, and equity. So on the right side of the slide, you see our vision. And we rolled that out in 2021. And it was an exciting way to be able to really connect DE&I to our business and how what we do in this space allows us to be better partners with our clients ultimately. And it also creates this work as a business strategy. And as you also probably know, certainly a vision is a really great vision, but it's also just a dream without a plan. So really that change on the left side really begins to demonstrate how do we move the firm through this change agenda. And at first, you're really being about aligning and inspiring, then improving and equipping, optimizing and achieving. And over the next 3 years, now that we've got some really great best practices, we've missed a couple of things as well, we're integrating and we're sustaining. So as we talk about integrating within talent, integrating within benefits, integrating within our HR business partner model. So for us, we really are taking what have we learned and how do we begin to integrate that across the organization so that it really is more sustainable long-term. And this has really allowed us to have deeper connections with associates to be able to tell this story, but also with our clients as we talk about how DE&I certainly shows up for them as people that invest on their behalf. So just a little bit of kind of our D&I and how we think about and talk about it inside the organization at a very high level.
Oh, I love how clearly this is laid out. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people here trying to take screenshots right now. The slides will be available later, but this is such a nice, clear picture of just goals over time and really, really building out a vision. Something else I'm curious about, in some early conversations that we had offline, you told us about, the important balance that you see between leadership, credibility, and capability. And I could see that being really important, especially as we talk about building out a vision. So what do you mean by that balance between credibility and capability? And what is your leadership framework like? We love a framework here.
Yep, this is our framework. And I'm going to try, I see a question popping up about how did we get the organization to view DE&I as more than just training? So I will start to address that with this, and then Raymone, you can add to that. So this is an organization, as investment managers, we have grown up with portfolio managers who are expert stock pickers. That's what they are as they build these portfolios. And so what has grown up is an organization where expertise in your craft is valued and respected, particularly in the investment space. And as we started to think about leadership and what kind of, again, as I said, as the asset management industry is consolidating at a rapid rate, is really some of the changes that we're seeing, and also like other industries thinking about AI, et cetera. But it's really consolidating. There's 3 types of asset managers. There's really small ones. We're kind of like a mid-sized one, and then there's the large ones as part of the bigger organizations. And so as we strive to move forward and remain T. Rowe Price, we really wanted people to start to think about how to expand their leadership capability, but we had to respect that all of our CEOs have historically come out of the investment space, and that business credibility is what has driven and sustained and grown our business. And so we didn't want to throw that out. We wanted to say that's really important, and we have a really good stake in the ground and a good foundation in that credibility. Now what we need you to do is to recognize as you get more senior, it's really important to broaden that leadership capability. And if you think about it, what's better than the T-shaped model? It's an easy marketing play when you're at T. Rowe Price, right? That T just rolls with it. But we started to think about what are the elements of broadening leadership capability and how do we keep it simple? Because we did have a leadership model that very few people used. It was kind of created by HR for HR. And this one we created with the business, with the management committee saying, and the CEO saying, look, we can create the opportunity, but this is your leadership model. And so what are the things as we think about driving the business into the future, what do we need to do? And that's delivering results, right? Leading outcomes. Change is a constant, as we all know. So we have to have people comfortable in understanding what it means to lead change. And then we also need to lead people, and culture is so important to us. It is something that we talk about all the time. And so that was our broadening of our capability. And then also who you are is how you lead. And so that's where you see number 3, where the individual characteristics are around social intelligent problem solving and learning agility. And you'll see there, we've just kind of called that the IQ, EQ, and then that cultural element there in that learning agility. What was different for us in this model, in addition to some of the things I talked about, was that we were shifting from a place where we had about 1,200 people who are people leaders. And the expectation was that they were the leaders in the organization and other people weren't leaders. And we kind of said, no, everybody here can lead from where they sit. And that is really what has taken off, that empowerment of people saying, oh, wait, like kind of standing up a little straighter, saying, wait, there's expectations of me. I'm a leader. So you expect me to engage with other people. You expect me to think about change, to look around corners from where I sit, to challenge the status quo in a respectable way. You expect me to make sure I'm engaging in people and building those relationships. And I think that's a lot of where our inclusivity comes. And I would say Raymone and I, before we built this model, locked arms and said that DE&I had to be part of this model. It is not an add-on, and that you cannot be a leader if you are not an inclusive leader. Like that, just like you can't pass go. And so we really did try to build that into our model. Raymone, what would you add from your view?
Yeah, and this was a great exercise for us. And I think Pam said it perfectly earlier around, we went to management committee, who are really our CEO and their direct report. So that executive team for the company, to really understand what leadership meant for them. So this was something that while we created it in HR, it certainly was informed heavily by their perspective and the things that they thought were important. And this really gives, from a DE&I perspective, a really great anchor point. So as we come behind talking about inclusive leadership and what we expect of you as a leader, we're able to leverage this very same model. And this doesn't make a leader feel like, all right, let me take my 10% and do D&I today. Like, no, this is your job fully. This is integrated throughout. So now we do have common language for that. So it really has been nice to have that at the core.
Absolutely. Let's get a little bit into what this looks like on the ground, via the programs you do. I think I saw a question that was asking, okay, so what does this look like? What are some of your programs? So you've told us about some specific initiatives that you'd like to spotlight today. So I know you have your Accelerated Leadership Development Experience, or ALDX. Tell us a little bit about that program and what are some of its components?
Yeah, so we love a good acronym, like most people, I think, in HR. So we certainly have ours as well. And this is a newer one for us. And we're on the back end of this first pilot experience. And as we were sharing earlier, how Pam and I are so in lockstep. So one of the things that we do is I'm in her meetings with the board and she's in my meetings with the board. So when she's doing succession planning, I'm in those conversations. When I'm doing the DE&I updates, she's in those conversations and always contributing. And one of the things that we were looking at a few years back was looking at how do we prepare more of our ethnically diverse associates to be ready for that next level in their leadership? How do we, one, identify, but two, really cultivate some of the headwinds that we know sometimes we can face as you navigate kind of the corporate structures. So to that end, as we went through the talent review process a few years back, we identified a couple of high potential top talent that we wanted to make some additional investments in. And we created an experience for them. We created a cohort and said, let's not create new things per se. Let's package all the things that we know we have that are probably a little bit hard to find on your own and create an experience around them. So really brought together 3 core elements. So tailored learning that was really focused on their development opportunities, individual development planning. And the third, and probably one of the bigger pieces, was around some structured coaching and executive sponsorship. So for these 12 or so individuals, they each were partnered with one of our management committee members. So again, those direct reports of the CEO, and they served as their sponsor for the next 9 months. So, and you see on the slide here, kind of a view into their experience over that 9-month period, but it really brought together a collection of what we all on this call would say are best practices around leadership development and training and coaching and sponsorship, but in a way that moves them through a curated experience. And I think what was great about it was it gave a spotlight to these associates in their career aspiration, but more importantly, it gave us a way to be able to learn through that process. And where I think it also integrated with the new framework, because we launched this just before the framework that Pam just talked about was kind of live for the organization. But just this year, as a part of that framework, we launched an experience for our executives where they were going through UVA Darden and executive experience. And Pam can talk about that experience, but what was exciting was the associates that went through this ALDX were invited to that cohort. So they actually were the first group to be able to go through that UVA Darden experience and have that additional exposure from an executive development perspective. So again, an example of taking something that may have started in DE&I as a program and moving it over into leadership development and talent. Now there really is a lot more staying power into that learning experience for our associates. So we certainly have seen some in this group get promoted, not entirely because of the experience, but certainly it's a really great component. What we also have heard was just the visibility and the investment in their career as a really important part of this experience. But Pam, what will you add about ALDX and certainly the UVA experience?
Yeah, I do think, and it's not easy to do, but we did have a very willing group of management committee members, so those directs to the CEO to mentor to act as sponsors for that group of people. And I know that that is not a gift that everybody in an organization gets. And I do think it had to do a little bit with getting back to that question of viewing DE&I as more than just training. I think Raymone has been able to really drive through the importance of accountability in our senior most leaders, partly through goals and partly through engagement and thinking about leadership development. So again, you know, I think Raymone can introduce that idea and push it, and then I can come around and say, okay, so let's talk about these programs that we want to do. So in our one-on-one meetings with them, it's kind of like a two-punch, if you will, from different angles as they think about their accountability in it and the commitment that they as leaders have to make if we are going to at all move the needle. I would say we're trying to do the same thing when you scale it for our UVA Darden program. So that is our executive level leadership, which I would posit that we really didn't have before. I think we had some kind of senior level training. We took down a lot of our programs when I got here over the past couple of years to then relaunch with this leadership framework. Again, the ALDX program, which is our high potential, but then our executive level learning, which we didn't have. So it's a case-based study where we focus on one of those capability components that was the horizontal of the T. So lead outcomes, lead change, lead people and culture. And it was really great to have the participants from the ALDX program there participating. It makes the bigger place feel small because these cohorts are done in person, but they're also done over time. So we have management committee sponsors of those programs. There's pre-work, there's pre-meetings, there's post-meetings where the group gets together with the management committee members and talks through the learnings and the impact and the change that they would like to drive in the organization to get that support. And we've spent a lot of time in that talking about and coming to agreement really on the how important culture is and how it's really important to actually talk about culture and define what we mean by some of the cultural elements that maybe we all don't have the same operational definition of. So it's been really great to watch this group step into their own leadership journeys.
And the one piece I'd add to that really quickly, just to Pam's comment, I know there was a question around kind of how do you create accountability for this, and I think that was just it. We've got the board approval for the importance of DE&I that was early on. We've got representation goals for the organization that certainly helps to measure progress. And I think one of the other elements was we bake this into everybody's expectation. So as HR professionals, we know the importance of a good goal-setting exercise beginning in January that you certainly conclude and track throughout the year. We've got one performance objective around DE&I, and it is the only objective that gets cascaded from our CEO to all of our 7,300 associates on January 30th each year. And it really does articulate his expectation, our expectation that everybody has a role in driving diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for me and for Pam, that means at least twice a year, every person is talking with their manager around how they're showing up or contributing to DE&I in some meaningful way. So again, trying to ensure that we're inspecting what we expect relative to DE&I.
And this other question in here around, did we have any target outcomes for promotion, mobility, and retention? We didn't necessarily have them around promotion and mobility, although that has been an outcome. We did have it around retention, and we didn't quite hit 100%, but we were very high.
Sounds like a very successful program. I'm wondering, I assume you put all the effort into creating it and it's been a success. Is this an annual program? Do you intend to have multiple cohorts per year? What's the future of the program look like?
We're actually having those conversations now. We likely may do an every other year potentially. So what we're sharing earlier is like the UVA Darden work, and we're building out some additional executive pieces. So we want to give that some space. We're making sure that we've got certainly diverse representation in those new programs that are coming, and then seeing kind of how all those land. We'll leverage this probably as a targeted intervention when necessary, more so than a ongoing program that lives on its own.
And then there was another question from Joanna about outside partner organizations. Obviously, you've got UVA Darden for this program. More broadly for leadership development, or maybe within this program as well that you haven't mentioned. Do you have any other partners in terms of content development or delivery or anything like that? Or is it mostly done in-house?
Oh, no, we have a lot of partners. We are a small but mighty team. We have, I'm gonna blank now, of course, because you've asked me the question. I can't think of nary one of them right now. I am literally, I can see the picture on the page with their logos and I can't think
Yeah,
of
if it comes to you could.
Yeah, no, we do work with Udemy. I think we're doing Big Think
Yeah.
now. I mean, we're doing a lot of the pick.
edX we use.
edX,
Yep.
okay. Great. Yeah, folks
Um,
always like to know who great organizations like yourselves, who you partner with. If you think of any others, feel free to drop them in the chat as we go along here.
Absolutely. Well, I promised everyone that I would come back to talking a little bit more about, some of what's made such a successful integration of, talent and DEI at the organization. So can you share some more of those key practices that you've been successful at just integrating that makes this partnership work?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the next slide, you will get this slide as well. But this is the second program that we've launched called At the Intersection really quickly to really create space for these really edgy and important intersectional DE&I conversations. And our first At the Intersection conversation was last year, and it focused on centering the experience of white men in DE&I. So we jumped right into the deep end with creating space, and we had a panel of white men from Rowe Price talking about their journey, where they've had some missteps and where they need help from us in that way. We've since had 4 other sessions since then, but really this is a way for us to really create space and dialogue on these really important topics that can sometimes get in the way of DE&I. So I didn't want to not talk about what was quickly on this slide.
Yeah, Raymone, on that, someone earlier in the chat had also asked, earlier you alluded to, I think working maybe going into next year on some more inclusive leadership development, like maybe a new program very specific on that. Did I mishear or?
No, you heard that right.
Yeah, can you say a little bit, someone was curious about that. Can you say a little bit more about what might be planned?
Yeah, so we have a managing inclusion offering that we've offered for the last couple of years, and it's been really well received. It was required for people leaders, and most have gotten through that experience. And now we're ready for kind of managing inclusion 2.0. So while we're right now going to RFP with a couple of vendors to look at what that content will look like, but we're seeing it'll be a lot of focus around probably microaggressions and how do you mitigate that in the workplace? How do you manage bias in a hybrid environment? So some of the things that we see are kind of popping with the experience of associates will likely be baked into this next experience. So that is something that we'll launch in Q1 of next year.
Great, I appreciate that. I know others on the call are probably at the same point, looking to either upgrade or create for the first time a new program like that. So sharing with them, some of the components of what you're looking at doing is very helpful. All right, now those key practices for the integration and the partnership between your 2 groups.
Yeah, as Pam and I were talking about, like what's some of the magic sauce that helps us, certainly have impact, but also have the right kinds of feedback and discourse when necessary as well. And these were really the 5 things that really came to mind. As first was building trust. As certainly we both joined around the same time, so it helped to kind of onboard a little bit together in that regard. But we had to build that with our team. So we do quite a bit of team building across our teams. We happen to sit together when we're at different campuses between our teams, which helps tremendously. And we do a bit of shared planning. The other element, I think, around our structure is there is a diversity acquisition team that lives under Pam's organization. And they dotted line into me, but they report hard line into Pam. So where those pieces make sense, it's been huge for us really building trust kind of across our teams. I think the second one is shared goals. When we think about representation goals, which for us are focused around gender, diversity, but also underrepresented talent. So Black, Hispanic, and Native American. We've got diversity slate goals, where we aspire that 40% of our slates will be diverse. That work lives largely in Pam's organization, certainly with her talent acquisition recruiters, as well as our managers. So again, having those shared goals, and we do debrief those together on a quarterly basis to be able to reimagine plans if we need to. Anything you would add, Pam, to any of those two before I go to the third?
I would just say, even though we have these goals and we meet formally quarterly, like Raymone and I also do have formal one-on-ones to make sure we're going through this. There are really no surprises when we do the checkup because we are talking all the time.
Yeah, the one thing Pam said earlier that made me chuckle, she was talking about we both have meetings certainly with like management committee and other leaders, and we come back and we compare notes. So we make sure that, between the two of us, we get the full story, and then we can actually action that. So it is always great to be able to compare notes and really have some more meaningful action plans coming out of those conversations. I think third is, communicate, especially as our teams have grown over time, ensuring that we're keeping each other's teams abreast of what's happening, where things are working. If there are departures, what have we learned about those departures? What are we seeing in the associate engagement survey? So for us, we do tend to communicate quite often across our teams, and it really is something that has helped us, I think, stay connected in the work that we're doing. The fourth one is a big one around resolving conflict and taking time to resolve issues before they become large conflicts. And we do have them. I had a meeting last week when I was in London where we had raised the diversity slate goal in one of our business units, specifically technology, just because of some of the issues we were having with getting diverse slates there. And our recruiter in London was like, it's hard for us to get to 30%. So we were able to talk about some of her concerns, but more importantly, we were able to action some things that we could do so they were being set up for success. So that's one example, I think, of the many where we're going to have sometimes tension in some of the priorities or the work, or we're moving too quickly with things, but we do make sure that we are kind of having those pauses to ensure that we're addressing those right up front so that we can get them over the line. And the last piece I'll add, now certainly invite Pam to share any examples, is recognition of the contributions. This work is really hard. It's a lot happening from a transformation perspective. It's a separate conversation around the external landscape for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I know that you all are living that as well. So for us, ensuring that our teams are recognized for the great wins, but also the great learnings. Everything doesn't always land perfectly, but we also want to make sure that we're looking for learnings in those. So we do ensure that we're recognizing the behaviors around collaboration and giving one another feedback and having a great idea. So these were really the 5 things that we tend to kind of hold up as things that have helped us be on the road to success on the partnership side. But Pam, what would you add?
The only thing I would emphasize that you said is that we as leaders try to make sure that we are making sure our teams are successful. So I want Raymone's team to be, I of course want, as an HR leadership team member, I want all of HR to be successful, but if there's things that Raymone's team needs feedback on and vice versa, if my team needs it, or that we're hearing anything, like we make sure that we are really setting the team up for success. We're trying to drive it through the organization. Feedback is tough. And building that trust is tough. We don't have the organization that's very comfortable doing that yet in an open way. And so, but we really are trying to role model that with our teams, because I do think, just going all the way back full circle to that Venn diagram, there's a lot of joint successes that we have, whether that's from the board all the way down through our teams. And those shared accountability and those shared goals, I think, really do drive our behavior and how we care about our teams.
Yeah. In the chat, Tanya Piazza Hughes asked a question that's just too good not to ask, and it kind of hits on what you're talking about. But the question was, how have you harmonized the nice culture you mentioned earlier with those difficult and uncomfortable conversations that have to happen?
It's a whole body of work. So let me start with, it is an entire body of work around really having feedback and creating a space for discourse. A couple of things that we'll do, and certainly Pam can talk about the leadership framework, which is a part of that, which you heard earlier, around really having those transparent conversations. One of the things that we've done is in the At the Intersection platform that I talked about a few minutes ago, our last session actually focused on feedback and civil discourse and how do you disagree in a way that is productive. because we really wanted our leaders and the entire firm to be able to understand some of those practices. So we are constantly reminding ourselves and others on who we're becoming, and that feedback is going to be essential to us getting there. But I'll let Pam add some of the programmatic pieces that I know we do as well.
Yeah, we have a lot of programs around it, right? We've got our year-end programs. We've got how do you have difficult conversations. The HR team we all had a book club this summer where we read Radical Candor. Pros and cons to that, right? I'm not necessarily endorsing that. I think there's some pros to the concept of it. But what we're doing is we're going to bring in like the Second City Improv group for our HR team in Q1. And we're going to try to role model it. So really what we're trying to do and to push within HR, because we're not all comfortable, even within HR, having difficult conversations. Me coming down from New York and working in banking, I probably was a little bit of a shock to the system, because things that I think of that are just straightforward and not direct are like crushing when you have a really nice culture, because I just kind of sometimes say the thing. And so we have to, really, I'd say, in addition to the programs that we have, we're trying to empower and build the capability for the HR team to have comfort in driving that. And I do think when Raymone joined, it was just post George Floyd, I think. And so there were people who wanted to have conversations in the DE&I space, but who just were so uncomfortable that they didn't know how to step into it. And I think we've been trying to build that muscle for the past 4 years, and we will continue to invest in building it. I don't think someone said, how did we solve it? We have not solved it. It is a work in progress, and we are trying.
Great to hear that you're bringing in the Second City Improv group. I think that's what Tanya was referring to in the chat, saying it's a great workshop. I've seen them not in a workshop context exactly, but multiple keynotes at ATD and other L&D conferences going back 15 years now, and they're always very, very well done. So kudos to you for looking at Second City.
We'll let you know how it goes.
Please do. Please do. And our last question, we want to touch just very quickly on the global aspect of it all. DEI and talent initiatives sometimes vary by the region around the globe. So what are some insights you can leave everyone with today, just from your work within specifically the APAC region? Yeah, what can you leave us with?
Yeah, Raymone and I just came back from a 2-week tour of our offices in Sydney, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. And I would say, it is just really important as you're thinking about, diversity and what just being really clear what you're solving for, right? So whereas mental health and discussions around mental health may be very much more open kind of in London and gaining traction in the US, it really hasn't gained much traction in Tokyo and in Japan, right? And so making sure that as you are leading global organizations, that you really take the time to understand the context where each of your employees and your offices are based, because that is really ultimately what's going to drive how they're engaging. And corporate messages are just lost on people when they don't resonate. And I think really taking the time to understanding it, investing it to the extent you can, traveling to those offices and meeting the groups to really understand the nuances is just really important. Not rocket scientists, basic human behavior, but I think sometimes in the scheme of all of the things that we have every day, because it's not right in front of us, it falls to the wayside, and being very intentional about that. Raymone?
You hit it. I mean, global where possible, and right size when you need to, for APAC or EMEA. It's kind of what I would leave with.
Well, thank you both. This has been such a dynamic conversation. There was lots of head nodding and lots of wonderful comments in the chat. So I hope you have a chance to look at those at some point. But I'm going to pass it back over to Tom. Thank you all for joining us. Great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll double down on that. Thank you both, Raymone and Pamela, and thank you, Amber, for facilitating a great conversation today. As Ada has put in the chat, and as you can now see on the screen, all of our Next Practice Weekly sessions are available for recertification credit hours. Or if you're someone with an HR cert from either HRCI or SHRM, just jot down the relevant program ID, activity ID, grab it from the chat, whatever works for you, and you'll be all set there. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week and weekend coming up, and we look forward to seeing you in our sessions throughout the month of November. Bye-bye now.